everybody. Good evening. It's Wednesday and it's Q&A and it's a webinar time info session with me, Philippa Fabry. I'm an education consultant here in Port Elizabeth, and we are talking about one of my favorite subjects, and that is reading. And it's always fascinated me in my years of practice and helping children with reading challenges. It's always fascinated me why some children just seem to pick up the reading skill without any problems, and then there are other children that really struggle to learn, or we say there's a code that they need to crack. It's all about cracking the code, and when they're exposed to reading, some children just seem to pick it up without any issues. Anyway, so we are celebrating Dr. Seuss this evening. One of my favorite books that I remember reading in school, and I've read to my class many times, including The Cat in the Hat, is Fox in Socks. And I think Dr. Seuss has it down to a fine art, the ability to be able to rhyme and teach children the art of rhyme and learning to read using rhyme and phonetic awareness. That's a big word, but I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But really tonight is all about reading, and if you have any questions, if you have any comments, please put them in the comments. It's great to know who's listening. Are you a teacher? Are you a parent? Where are you from? And yeah, it's just always lovely to spend this quick 45 minutes with you talking about something that I'm very passionate about. And I'm also thrilled to be joined by my colleague, Dr. Ah Hing, a remedial therapist. She's also just like me. She's a researcher, and we both spend a heck of a lot of time Googling and researching these kind of topics, because at the end of the day, we are there to help parents. We're there to support children with their academic challenges. So yeah, as I said, reading is like cracking the code. It's a mechanical skill that kids need to be taught. Kids naturally learn to speak, but they don't naturally pick up reading. It's something that they need to learn. And often we find again that some children might learn to read really well. They can read well, but they don't always understand what they're reading. It's really like it's a mechanics that they can just read the words, but they don't always process the information. So that's why the title of this evening's talk is Learning to Read and Reading to Learn, because in foundation phase, children are taught to read, and by the time they get to sort of the late intermediate phase, they have to learn how to learn, and basically they've got to be able to read well enough that they understand what they are reading and they're needing to learn. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to bring on my dear friend Danny, and we're going to kick off this evening talking about the preschool stage and exposing children to reading. Now, I don't know about you, Dan. Hi, good evening. Are you okay there? I see you've got a beautiful cupboard there behind you, filled with games and books, and it looks very exciting.
Phil, the only way to get... Oh, thank you for having me. It's always good to chat to you and to share ideas and experiences. The only way to encourage kids to read is to have a lot of books around and to read, so that they can see you as an adult or the parent or caregiver, whoever it is. If they see you reading and they see they have access to books that they can reach and use whenever they'd like to, that's the start of it all.
Absolutely. I don't know about you, but when I was pregnant, I used to read to my fetus inside my tummy. Because
yes.
I thought that at least if we're exposing them to reading early on, also the classical music and Brahms' lullaby and all those kind of things, but also being able to expose children to reading and reading stories. Now, I mean, yeah, it's probably one of those things. They say that the child can hear in the womb and all of that, but that's how early we can expose children to reading, is when they're inside our womb already. But getting to the preschool stage, I've got a picture of a dad reading to his little ones. Gina, have you got that pic there? Reading to his children, and a bedtime story. That is the best time to be able to expose kids to stories. And really, at the end of the day, you're wanting them to enjoy looking at a book, turning the page, reading, looking at the pictures. They don't really understand the words at this stage, but they just knowing that there's a book, and inside that book is a story, and inside that story is all kinds of magical adventures and characters. And it's really about exposing them to the wonder of stories. And when kids learn to speak, they learn to speak in sounds. So obviously we all know they start with the mama and dada and ta and no and come and up. And those are that is the first time that they actually identify and they want to use sounds in order to communicate with their parents. And so that is really where we start to expose children to sounds, and we teach them nursery rhymes, and we teach them about, we used to put them on your knee and clap hands and sing little songs and bounce them up and down and give them the joy of that phonics, that again, phonic awareness. That's going to be our grown-up word tonight, is phonic awareness. But teaching them about rhyming, about sounds, and how we can put little sounds together to make words. Now, Dan, in terms of parents and what parents can do, I showed that picture there of reading to a child. But if maybe your child isn't really grasping rhyming so well, or hasn't really started speaking when they should have started speaking, what can parents do to almost just try and I suppose accelerate or just get them back on track in terms of learning sounds and little words, reading little words, and looking at books and enjoying books?
For one of the things that come to mind is playing games. Kids love games. There's a game that I love playing with kids, and that is I went to the moon. So that phrase is repeated. So you'll say, I went to the moon and I took my brush. Then the child's got to build on that. I went to the moon and I took my brush and my teddy bear. Then it's my turn again. I went to the moon, I took my brush and my teddy, and I took a piece of cake.
My blankie.
And yes. My blankie. So they are using that same little entry phrase.
It's memory. It's memory and sequencing.
Exactly. Memory and sequencing. Because you'll find if there's a group of say you've got two kids and it's mom and dad and the two kids playing, you'll find that the child will have a look at mom, and they will know, okay, mommy said I'm going to take my cup of tea. Dad said I'm going to take my beer. My brother said he's going to take his cell phone and I'm going to take my blankie. So the child makes that visual association, yes, with what that person is going to bring. Yes, but it's that repetitive action that, and hearing those sounds. Children love anything that rhymes. For example, I've got a little book here. I don't know if you can see that. It's called Bubble Trouble, and it's about this man who's got this dog. But throughout the book, there's a little phrase that says, watch out, Bubble, here comes trouble. And it's on every sort of alternate page. And by the time you get to page number 3, before you get to that phrase, the child will say, watch out, Bubble, here comes trouble. Because they've picked that up. One thing I must warn parents about, when you are reading to your child, it doesn't matter when it is. If it's a story that you know off by heart because it's a story your child loves, just keep reading. Do not even try to skip pages. Because your child knows every single picture in that book. So as soon as you've skipped a page, and if your child can't read it actually doesn't matter, because they will say to you, where's the picture with the rabbit climbing the tree? And then you've got to go back, you've got to start again. So choose your battles, and rather just, even if you read just one sentence on the page, if it's a really long paragraph, if you don't want, just don't let the child see you don't want to read. So playing games, using rhyme wherever it's possible. In the car, when you're driving down Cape Road, ask the child to have a look and see what signs they can identify. Many children can't read McDonald's, but they know the Golden Arches. But Phil, having said that, I saw a meme in this past week that said, we underestimate children. Don't think they can't read and understand big words, because if they can read Tyrannosaurus Rex, they can read anything if you teach it to them.
Yes.
So I think it's that the parental interaction is vitally important.
And
Don't rush the
repetition.
reading. The repetition is it's always important.
Repetition, games, making it fun, and exposure at the end of the day. As much
Well,
as
that's
possible.
how Old MacDonald had a farm, for example.
Yes.
That is that repetition again. The nursery
Yes.
rhymes they've learned. And the older kids, when you get to high school, I mean, most of the lyrics in the music they listen to nowadays is very repetitive. So they're hearing that at the same time. That's
Yeah.
also repetitive. It's not
Yes.
just for the little ones.
Yes. Okay, so we're talking about now they're starting school. So now they're going into grade 1. It's their first real formal exposure to learning to read. They're in grade 1, and usually at school there's a formal phonics program that they follow, and there's a formal reading program that they follow. And the phonics program usually starts with the individual letters. There's Alphaland, there's Letterland, there's quite a few that teachers might use. And the kids get exposed to those letters, and they associate those letters with objects. And eventually they'll associate those letters with the phonic sounds. And they'll come home and they'll need to probably go and collect as many things as they can think of that start with the letter B, and come to school and they've got their little bag full of little objects starting with the letter B, etc. So it starts very, very basic, and then it builds from there. So as you start with the individual sounds, you then look at the endings of words and the vowels in the middle of words, but it's really very basic 3-letter words or 4-letter words, and they learn to associate those phonic sounds with blends, and they learn to then break up the word into the individual sounds again. So when we speak about sight words, because I don't think parents always understand what is a sight word. So moms and dads, a sight word is a word that we expect the children to automatically be able to read at first glance. They don't need to try and sound that word out. If they do try and sound it out, it's going to sound gobbledygook. A sight word doesn't necessarily follow a phonetic pattern, but it's a word that they need to almost automatically identify. And they build up their own little repertoire in their brain, in their their dictionary of those words. Again, some children don't always have a great memory to remember those sight words. So when we talk about sight words, we talk about words like house, words like the, them, anything that really is not a phonetic word. So if parents are struggling to get them to remember the word, so they had the word, they knew it now today, but tomorrow they've forgotten the word, and they're getting these lists of 20 words to learn at home, and they don't really have a memory bank of being able to recognize those words, and it's frustrating. So parents, again, Danny, what would you suggest parents can do to try and encourage the processing and the recall of those sight words?
For creating opportunities during the course of the day, when you've fetched your child from school, for example, or from aftercare, create opportunities during the day for your child to actually make use of the phonics words that they have, or those sounds. If you're driving down the road and you see there's a stop sign, ask your child, what does that sign, what does it start with? What is the first letter? What is the first sound? S. Good. What is the last sound? By then you've probably gone through it already. So, they then need to remember. It's a P. Or you can ask the child if you're going to the park. What is that? It's a tree. What does it start with? Starts with a T. So make opportunities for your child. And if you as a parent are not sure, I promise you, your child will teach you what they do in class. And you can pick up, you'll pick up quite easily how to create your own games. Because parents, I think, are a little nervous about trying something because they're worried that what they're going to do is not right. It doesn't matter. Try it anyway.
Yeah, and I think
What
what you're saying there about getting them to associate a word with the individual sounds, it gets to the next stage where you can say things like, say stop, but now don't say the t. And what do you have? For them to be able to extract the t out and to say sop, or say tree, but don't say r. Then they must say
Yes.
t. And those,
That's
again,
right.
that's phonetic awareness that they need to, and they need to be able to hear that word. So we need to make sure that the kids can hear perfectly well. There isn't fluid in the ear, or there isn't any sort of blockages. We've always got to make sure that we've cleared that question, that there's no auditory issues, because often that could play a role, that they don't hear when you say stop. They don't hear the p. They think you're saying stop because they don't hear the p. So again, it's important for parents to just make sure that those hearing tests are done. I don't know, Danny, I would say almost every 2 years, sometimes annually, they need to have their hearing and eyesight done, especially when they're so little. Hey.
I think that, the parents do, when they do homework with their child, it doesn't even have to be homework really. You can hear if you have called your child and you've noticed over a period of time your child is not responding, and I'm not talking about selective hearing, which all children are really good at. If your child is not responding, try and make sure that they actually can hear you. So a basic
Especially
thing,
if you're
stand
speaking
behind
to
your
them
child.
from behind. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
If teachers will pick it up in a classroom as well.
Yes.
If you're standing behind the child and you call their name and they don't respond, try it a little louder. And if they still don't respond, then, maybe that's a warning sign. Another thing I just want to go back to, talking about phonetics, is moms and dads and grannies and grandpas, whoever is listening, there's a difference between the sounds of the letters of the alphabet and the names of the letters of the alphabet. And when the children start school, when they start that formal phonics, they're starting with the sounds, the a, b, k. And it's very important for them to master that before they go over to the names, the A, B, C. Because if they haven't got that solid foundation of the sounds, they are going to become very confused when it comes to their phonics. They're going to mix them, which is going to impact on their spelling and on their reading.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to lower primary. So now we're talking about they've moved out of the foundation phase now, and they're in grade 4 and grade 5. So they might just be starting writing little tests that they would have to go and study for. Now here already, the exposure to reading instruction at school has almost disappeared. There are no more formal reading lessons in intermediate phase. Now, it's about them reading on their own, often having to follow along in the textbook while the teacher reads. And there isn't that instruction anymore. Now we expect kids to already have the mechanics of reading. We expect them now to read fluently enough that they can understand what they are talking or what they are reading about. Things like syntax and semantics come into play here. And when we talk about syntax, moms and dads, it's just a fancy word for grammar. It's the rules of sentences where we understand where the verb goes in a sentence, where the noun goes, that if you change the order of words in a sentence, it could change the whole meaning of the sentence. So syntax is really just the grammatical rules of language. Semantics, on the other hand, has to do with the vocabulary and the comprehension of that sentence. So these are important skills, or these are important aspects of language that come into play with intermediate phase grades 4 and 5. And we expect children, again, to be able to read a basic comprehension and understand and be able to answer basic questions. And when I say basic questions, it's questions where the answer is clearly found in the text. There is no having to think about it, or no having to, higher order thinking. It's really, if the story is about a boy called Mark with his dog called Ben and they go to the beach, etc. The question will be, what kind of pet does the boy have, or what was the boy's name, and where did the boy go? So these are basic comprehension questions. Now again, if your child is struggling to understand what they're reading now, and their reading is still quite sort of jerky, and there isn't fluency, they're having to read slowly, they don't have that automatic repertoire of sight words, they are a little bit, I would say, reliant on phonics. Here the red flags would be that we need to try and understand, okay, why is the fluency not there? Why is the sight word repertoire not there? Why haven't they learned basic sight words, and where can we help at home when they have to now come home and start studying for their tests and exams? So I think, again, when we talk about what parents can do, it's all about making sure that your child has got some kind of study method or some kind of routine when they come home and they have to do homework. So I would say when your child is reading, make sure that they understand what they're reading about. Ask them little questions. Even if you read and they have to listen, ask them, what have they read? What was the name of the little boy? So you instigate, you ask those comprehension questions. And then when they are reading, let them ask you a question. Say, Mom, what did you hear me read? Let them ask you. Because they can't be asking questions about what they're reading if they haven't grasped what they're reading. Mm-hmm. So Dan, we were just talking about, okay, what would you suggest parents can do at home when kids start studying for exams? So that's that first little stage now that they have to start reading to understand.
Comprehension skills, Phil, you mentioned earlier that reading is a mechanical skill. And it's very important that parents understand, if your child can read beautifully, that does not mean they've understood. And comprehension is vitally important when it comes to being able to answer questions. Comprehensions are normally given to the children in format of read the passage and here are the sentences. That does not necessarily mean that the reason the teachers do that is because they've got to ask a class of 30 or 40 children to do comprehension. You can't test comprehension with individual children when there are so many children. But that's not the only way you can test comprehension. Because once you've given the children a comprehension test to do, and they write those answers down, they start becoming confused with what the answer is, and I can't spell this word, and before they know it, they've got 4 out of 10 for comprehension, when in fact they knew every single answer. So for moms and dads at home, test your child's understanding of things that challenge them. Don't, Phil, you mentioned earlier the boy and his dog, and challenge the child in terms of what kind of dog do you think that is? So that the child's not just able to answer on the line questions. Those are the basic, straightforward. Yes. They can look a little bit deeper so that they can read between the lines and make inferences. Absolutely. And then eventually go beyond the line, because the higher grades are building up towards high school. In primary school, they're building to high school, and at high school level, it's essential that they start developing these skills, because they need to start answering essay questions. And those require structure. So if they don't start developing the structure of being able to discern between on the line, between the line, and beyond the line, that brings me back to prediction of stories. When you're reading a story to your child, we all, even as adults, we're watching a movie and we anticipate. And when the movie doesn't end the way we want it to end, then, the director didn't know what they were doing, because that's not how it was supposed to end. Or when we read a book. So get them to look for information in the pictures. Pictures will give them a lot of information that they might not see in or be able to read.
Yes.
And beyond the picture.
I love what you said. On the line, between the line, and beyond the line.
Beyond the line. Those are things where they've got to...
Yes.
and beyond the
Yes.
line.
I like
Um,
that.
Phil, I just want to go back also to, where children have got to look at the detail in words. It's very difficult for some kids to be able to do that. So I like to use the Where's Wally books. And they
Yes.
are absolutely fantastic because, I mean, I need a magnifying glass to be able to find Wally here. The only time I've been able to find Wally is during lockdown because he was the only one on the street. So children love these because
Yes.
they will be focused, they will be determined, they are going to find Wally. And there are a number of books like that on. It's not just Where's Wally. There's one about the sea and oceans, where they've got to look and they've got to see how many dolphins can they find in the water, how many
And also find the
starfish are hiding.
differences. Yeah,
Yes.
those kind of, yeah. So it's looking for information.
That's exactly it. So if a child is struggling with words, help them to find information looking at the pictures first, and then gradually move on to. And for this happens, there are kids sitting at high school level that also have dyslexia, that are also struggling with reading and writing. But I think we're going to get that. We're going to get onto that
Yeah.
in the next
But
session.
when you spoke about movies, it gave me an idea. I think another thing that we can do, if your child is a struggling reader, regardless of how old they are, is put subtitles on, so that when your child is watching a movie, there's subtitles that they can read as well. That's also just a sort of like an incidental exposure to words that they possibly are not expecting to have to do. But just put the subtitles on, because their eye immediately will look there and they will be reading without even thinking about it. Let's move on to upper primary. So here we're talking about grade 6 and 7, just before they go to high school. And in this stage now, the textbooks have really got quite a lot longer. The texts in the textbook are a lot longer. There are less pictures, although we love the colorful textbooks nowadays that you have. In our day, our textbooks were lovely black and white books. But the fact that our textbooks are nice and big, A4, a lot of them nicely spread out with diagrams and all kinds of visual aids and that, which really does help. So again, less opportunities for reading instruction. There's no time for that. It's all about having the mental energy or the mental capacity to be able to do longer pieces of work. So when a child is asked to do a comprehension and it's a long piece, you're looking at possibly 4 or 5 paragraphs with 20 odd questions. They just have to look at that piece of work and they're exhausted before they've even started. So, part of being able to read is having the mental capacity or the energy to be able to do that. The same comes with having to write paragraphs and summarize and write essays. If you say to a child, you've got to read, you've got to write a 300, 400 word essay, oh, it's like you're asking them to climb Kilimanjaro. They just, honestly, if they're not somebody that enjoys texts and words and putting pen to paper, it's going to be a real task. So it's really about being able to pull the most important information out of that piece. When they're having to do comprehensions, as Danny said, it's more about reading between the lines and beyond the lines now than what's in the lines or on the lines. And being able to pace himself. So to be able to know, okay, I'm reading too fast. I didn't get that. I need to go back and do it again. Or, okay, I don't know that word. Let me go back and see if I can find another word that means the same. Let me try and substitute this word because I don't know this word. Let me try and substitute it for a similar word. It's all those kind of skills that we need kids to be able to do and adjust their own pace so that they are reading fast enough and slow enough to be able to grasp what they're reading. So yeah, let's talk about, so now this is just before they go to high school, so the last grades of primary school. Dan, what would you say for parents?
Full reading is learning at the end of the day. I think we did mention 2 weeks ago when we did dyscalculia that when children struggle with reading comprehension skills, it's going to impact on them when they're doing problem solving and the story sums. So it's vitally important that we get the kids to be able to focus on the key factors. You mentioned the key words earlier on. What I like to do is when it comes to comprehension, children are often, as you said, they're overwhelmed. They look at this passage, and what I
They've
do
given up
is I
before they
get
started.
exactly. I let them have a look at the questions first, and I let them take a highlighter, and we read through the questions first. So I'm actually teaching them how to find the word. Just that I may only choose one word in each question that they think is important. And once they've read through the questions, then they go and they start reading the passage. Because when they then read and they hear that word that they found in a question, then I encourage them to go back and have a look at what was that, or highlight it, or put a circle around it. That's your piece of paper. Just don't write in books. And then you can go back and you can easily have a cross reference between the question and the section in the paragraph. Some children struggle with words that have visual similarities. So they might read, the house went galloping down the road. And then they will stop, and they sometimes parents or teachers will say, not the house, the horse. Give the child an opportunity to correct themselves, because when they have read that this house has gone galloping down the road, they will very quickly say, that can't be. And then they will correct themselves,
Correct.
because house and horse look so similar to one another. And the shape, the outline of those two words is exactly the same. So give them those opportunities. When you are working with your children in the higher primary grades, explain to them, show them a book that's got a table of contents so they can see. When you use this, you'll know exactly what to find, where to find what it is you're looking for in the book. This is what you will find in the book. If you look at the back, not all books have an index where they can actually find a specific topic or
Or a
detail that they're
glossary.
looking for. Exactly. Not all of them will have that. So if there isn't a glossary and they need a synonym, for example, let them use a dictionary. But I'd like to just a word of caution here. Please be very careful. If you are doing the PH sound, and a child comes to you and says, how do I spell photograph? Please be very careful of saying, there's the dictionaries, please go and use a dictionary. Because you might get back to that child in 20 minutes' time, the child's still flipping through the letter F to find photograph.
Yeah.
So that again is where parents and teachers can make sure that they create that awareness that there are some sounds that are the same, but they are made up of different letters of the alphabet. Something that is also something that parents can take into consideration is to use topics that the child are interested in. If you've got a son and he hates reading, but he's a surfer, go and buy a magazine. Go and buy a surfing magazine or a cycling magazine, a rugby magazine. He will initially probably just look at the pictures. If he's in matric and you buy him Sports Illustrated, he will most definitely only look at the pictures. So be discerning with which books you're going to give your kids, but let them
Let
have a
them
look
read
at that.
anything. Yeah. Anything.
Exactly. These are fantastic, and you can get them at secondhand bookstores. It doesn't matter. They are reading. If they have a look at a book like this, the child can tell you, even at high school level, they can tell you where it starts, because it's got the title at the top of the story. And then normally these little stories, when it gets to the end, it's got like a little bubble at the bottom here and it says the end. So let them read those comics. Let them read.
Absolutely.
In a newspaper, they've got those 3-frame comics. Let the child read that. You don't say you haven't read enough now. It probably isn't enough. But for a child that is struggling, that is enough. If they can read it and they understand what it's all about, then you've already conquered a mountain.
Yeah. Well, that brings me to high school now, because again, at high school, specifically for English, a lot of the paper is comics and comic strips.
Yes.
And not only being able to just read the basic text in there, But there comes your being able to think beyond that comic strip and having to interpret and knowing what's actually going on beyond that picture. So when they come to high school and they're having to now extract information, because at the end of the day, that's what studying is. It's extracting information, remembering that information, processing it, and putting it back on a piece of paper in my own words, so that whoever is marking that paper is giving me my mark that I'm due. And it's also reading for entertainment. We don't just read because we need to study some work. It's all about reading for information, reading for entertainment, reading to upskill ourselves, reading so that we know what's going on in the world, reading so that we know what's going on social media, and knowing as well what is going on social media, what is fact, what is fiction, what is someone's opinion, and what is fake news. That is something that kids they're not always able to discern what's fact and what's fiction. So it's so important now as we move into the high school and beyond that children are automatically able to do those higher order thinking skills that you referred to. So before we go on to the last section, Dan, I don't know if there's anything you want to point out at this stage now, specifically reluctant readers.
I think if a child doesn't want to read, the worst thing you can do is tell them that they're never going to manage to get anywhere. They're not going to be able to read. You're never going to pass school. Because as soon as you start badgering them, they are going to build this wall around them and they will not want to read at all. And then you've lost the battle. So start with small steps. Even if they are in grade 8, please just start with small steps. If you are not sure, then ask the teacher. You might find high school teachers are very reluctant to assist, partially because they believe that when a child reaches high school, that the problems should have been sorted out by the primary school teachers. And I think also because that's not part of their training. High school teachers are not trained to identify children that have got barriers to learning. What do I do with a child who is struggling to read properly? So parents, if you are aware of it, then please just monitor your child at home. You can't, especially now with online learning, please, there's a difference between homeschooling and online learning. And I often hear parents now, especially with COVID and lockdown, they use those two terms interchangeably, and they are not the same thing. Homeschooling is when your child stays at home permanently, and the parent or parents, together with some tutors, help the child and teach the child. Online schooling is what the schools have been doing now during COVID with lockdown, where the teachers are preparing the work, the teachers are uploading videos to YouTube. That is online learning. And I think that's very important for especially, okay, we're going to go on to high school, and I'll move on to high school with you. Otherwise, I jumped the gun.
Yeah, I think you've put a point there in that teachers are not equipped to deal with a child who has a reading problem. And I don't think that it is, I think we again, like you've just spoken about online learning and homeschooling, I think we use dyslexia, that everybody's got dyslexia because they can't read. The latest stats, and I was sort of doing a bit of research for this whole, for this webinar, is that dyslexia is one of the problems that a child could have with reading. Only about 4% of children have got dyslexia. About 10 to 20% of children might have a reading problem. And dyslexia, again, is a very specific problem with phonetics and awareness and phonological coding, whereas a reading problem could just be because they've had a bad deal. They've had poor instruction. They haven't been exposed to reading, so it could be something external from the child, whereas dyslexia is normally an internal problem, is normally a neurological problem, and an external problem like bad instruction or poor instruction or not enough exposure to reading or something like that could be the cause of a reading challenge. So again, parents, I'm also speaking to you to say that if your child needs accommodations when they get to grades 10, 11, and 12, and they're needing to have a scribe or a reader or some kind of accommodation when it comes to writing exams, that has to be applied for through the Department of Education or through the IEB if your child is doing IEB. But you can't apply in matric. That has to be applied for way before that. You need to have evidence that the child has got a reading problem. You have to have a recent assessment done. There's all these sort of issues that have to be taken into account. So we haven't got time to delve into that now. But if you do have a problem and you're wanting to chat to either Danny or myself in terms of what accommodations your child can have to help them with their exams or to help them in the classroom with reading, you can contact both of us and we could help you with that. But my last little blurb, and I think we've also got a picture. Dan, you shared a picture with me. I had a good chuckle of the how do you get your child to read? And you alluded to that just now. Yeah, pick 4. How do you get your child to read books? And it's all about, if you are a book reader, 9 times out of 10 your child will read books because they're watching you. Whereas if you're on your cell phone all day and you never pick up a book, it's hardly likely that your child is going to pick up a book. So it's that whole monkey see, monkey do.
Sure.
But again, Dan, the benefits of reading to your child, they're all over the internet. We know how good it is to read to your child. But how do you create an enthusiastic reader? How do you promote that love for reading, that sort of, oh, I've got some free time now, let me go and pick up a book?
Be the example. Make reading fun. Make it exciting. Very often kids look at a book, and if a book is really boring, I mean, you look at it and you just think, oh, I really don't want to read this book right now. When you read with enthusiasm. Not that you're necessarily reading to your child, your book, what you are reading. And here I'd like to encourage parents to read a book, not a book on a Kindle, a book where you can actually, or a magazine, where you are feeling the paper and turning the pages, because that is the only way your child is going to see you working with that book. How to turn the pages, how to look after a book, not to spill cool drink or juice all over it, not to turn the pages with dirty hands. All of those things are vitally important. Books are expensive. They can't do that with a Kindle. So let them see you actually reading. Please, moms and dads, don't ever say to your child, it's all right, I couldn't read at school either. It's not about you.
Look at Richard Branson. He's dyslexic. He doesn't like
Absolutely.
We know that. We know these things. But at the end of the day, we need to be able to have a basic understanding of reading and language. And as far as possible, you got to stretch them as far as possible. And then you can say, okay, let's go back to the computer, or let's use spell check or whatever. But let's not give up just yet. We've got 2 minutes before we go offline. So I want to acknowledge whoever's watching. Tracy, it's awesome to see you online. Tracy Johnson is also a well-respected remedial therapist in PE. I know she's also very, very competent in picking up reading challenges and helping children with reading challenges. So it's awesome to see you online, Tracy, and thank you so much for your support. If there are any questions, if you are not wanting to ask questions this evening, just FYI, next Wednesday at 8 o'clock, I'll be doing Q&A, and we'll be talking about this specific topic, so you can save your questions for next Wednesday. It's just a quickie, 10 minutes, just to come on and to ask, to answer some questions, and I will literally summarize this talk in 5 minutes flat. I'll talk very fast. And then if there are any resources for parents, I would encourage you to go and look at LD Online. It's www.ldonline.org. There should be a ticker that I've put there that comes across the screen. And then another one, Reading Rockets, www.readingrockets.org and ldonline.org. And please, if you are needing to have assessments, Danny does reading assessments, I do reading assessments, just again to see if your child is underperforming. and they're not on par with the rest of the children on their grade level, we need to try and understand where the stumbling blocks are. Marcel, thank you so much for watching. You're a regular on this stream. I really do appreciate your support. It's so nice to have people popping in just to say hello, and at least you know that there is somebody out there listening. But Danny, thank you so much for coming on again with me. It's always such fun. Next week, we're going to do, I haven't quite decided yet, but I think we need to do something on writing. We've done maths, we've done reading. Now we need to deal with writing. And I think that's going to be our topic in 2 weeks' time, not next week. Next week is Q&A.
Yeah.
The week after that, we'll talk about writing and dysgraphia and how to help your children with their writing and their fine motor. So tune in next week, not next week, or next week for Q&A. The following week we'll be doing writing. And yeah, thank you so much. Lauren is also online. Lauren is one of our psychs in town, Lauren Herbst. She does scholastic assessments, cognitive assessments. I think she's at the, she's with Sue Rist, isn't she?
Mouse House.
Yes. Mouse House.
The Mouse House.
Lauren, that's correct. And Lindsay Quinn, also online. Thank you for watching, Lindsay. And remember, if you have any questions, you can contact Danny, you can contact me, and you can watch next week Q&A. Danny, thank you so much again. Have a great evening, everybody. readingrockets.org, ldonline.org, and Ignatia Mnguni. Thank you, very informative. You are very welcome. Thank you for watching. Liz Bain, thank you so much. I'll see you tomorrow for coffee. Barbara Dawson, thank you, Philippa and Danny. Thank you for watching. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much. Have a great evening. We'll see you next Wednesday. Thanks, Danny.
Okay.
Bye.